I hope everyone is having a good evening. As I was mentioning over on Instagram, that I just did recently created a post based on a digital painting that I just finished the other night, and it's a painting that I took it's a painting of a photo that I took when I was on Woodward. Going over to Chicken Shack, and it was just something that I did to really kind of start getting used to using the new laptop that I just recently purchased, and just doing digital painting in general. So, and got a lot of interest from some individuals on how I go about starting a painting. And what I have here, and I had this as the last slide in my Instagram post, this photograph that's in the lower, what you see here in the lower right corner, and I'll zoom in for it here. I'll actually, let's get into the proper spot and do that. That's, it's so difficult to get this thing to work here. So let me just get this. There we go. Okay. So as you can kind of see here, this is a photograph that I just took. It was, me being caught in traffic. It was at that really great time of day where the sun is just, creating some really interesting light source and cast shadows. And it was two gentlemen, line workers doing some repair work on a power line not far from where I live. So I thought that was an interesting thing to check out. And I liked all the different elements happening compositionally. I also really liked, just the different interesting shapes and design of it all. So I figured, I'm really just taking photos all the time like this. And then, just to kind of tie it back, I have a friend who is like, hey, every time I'm at this point now with my smartphone that, whenever I need to start freeing up space on my iPhone so that I can keep taking photos because I take so many crazy photos like this. And I was thinking, yeah, I like that idea. I think I'm going to steal that idea, and I went with it. So that's just something that I decided to do. And so just to kind of give you an idea here of what I'm doing on my in this painting, this is how this is really how I create digital paintings in general. And it's a really similar exercise that I teach when I teach traditional painting, which is, when I'm working, first of all, I like to shoot my own photo reference. I think that's something that I'm very much, it's just something that I do. And I also, when I start a painting or when I start teaching painting, I teach students to think of things from light to dark. Try to simplify the number of values or steps of light, from light to dark in a painting. Take your photo reference, convert it to grayscale so that you can see the true value of things. For example, if you look here in this grayscale photo of the photo reference that I have off here to the right at the top, it's a little bit laggy at the moment. My apologies here. Come on, you can do it. Okay, there we go. You can kind of see here that this tail light on the car that was in front of me isn't really that intense. But when you look down, if it would just work for me here, it's a little bit laggy, my apologies. You look at how intense that light looks here in the color reference, or how this, construction cone looks a little bit lighter, but it's really not that much lighter than than some of these other objects. For example, the light that's hitting the trucks. Well, actually, you can tell the light that's hitting the trucks is a lot lighter than the light of that tail light on that car in front of me, and I think it's the reason why I bring this up is it's super important for you to see that when you're painting, because you sometimes get distracted because it's the color red and the other stuff is white, and it's just, you get hung up on some of those things when you look at stuff in color, and really so much of painting is understanding the lightness or darkness of an object, how close the object is to you, especially when you're working in, when you're doing representational painting, for example. So what I'm going to do, and this is a key thing that I do at the beginning of the painting, is I work everything grayscale, and I work in a variety of different shape layers, and I'll go through that real quick here. When I start off, I'm just going to turn off everything other than that first layer. And you'll see I've got a lot of different layers here turned on and off. So I'm starting off by, really, I use the selection tool over here, and I use the polygonal or the general lasso tool. I use these two to create selections, which are active areas that I paint in, and then I keep building layers on top of that. So for example, this is the background layer, this is the sky layer, this is the ground plane, and I'm trying to divide the composition up, because what I tend to do when I work this way is subconsciously my mind wants order, so I want to have this ground plane be dead center in the middle of the piece, and it's not. Creating this right here with some ground light tones and some of the telephone wires. This is just a general block-in shape of those cars, the cranes coming from the cars, the cone, the car in front of me, the dark shape tones on those two trucks, and then the highlights on those trucks. And so I'm going to keep creating layers with different shapes, and then I'm going to be using a couple of effects here in Photoshop. Once I get everything determined with the once I get every shape, the major shapes defined here, where I'm just simply blocking in, I'm going to then I'll go in and I go into what I call a rendering phase. But before I even do that, I will be selecting everything in grayscale, and I will be converting it to color using this little feature over here. You see this checkerboard here above the layers, and it's called Lock Transparent Pixels. I'll be using that feature quite a bit once I get all the major shapes blocked in. What I'm going to do right now, just to kind of show you the type of drawing that I'm doing right now, the shape drawing that I'm doing isn't necessarily always precise. I try to get the silhouette or the shape design of the object as accurate as possible, but it doesn't always work. I'm using an imprecise tool and I'm not worried about being super precise, because sometimes when I create the object and it's not looking absolutely perfect, that's okay. Certain projects that I work on, that would be a big issue, and I act accordingly. But something like this, where some of the quirkiness of it being not super precise, is kind of what I like, the charm of it at this point. So without any further delay, I'm just going to jump in and start working on this and share with you guys. And if you have questions or anything, just please feel free to add them in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them. What I'm hoping to do, the major thing that I'm going to do with tonight, is I'm going to work to make this available via YouTube once the recording's done. I think what I'll do is I'll have it up as an unlisted video, and then if anybody's interested in it, I'll point you to that direction. I know there's been a couple of friends of mine that have been asking about that. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to continue blocking in the directional light planes that I started here. So I'm using this polygonal lasso tool here to draw in this shape. The thing about this, I don't get too worried about the shape not being perfectly designed, or getting the silhouette absolutely perfect at first, because what I'm really trying to do here is I'm just trying to get and block in the major shapes. And I'm using texture brushes. I in Photoshop I go and if anybody's interested in that, I can share that with you. But it's pretty basic. It's Kyle's brushes that you download. I sometimes make my own custom brushes. In fact, that's what I used to make before Kyle's brushes were available. But once he does a really great job with it, so I haven't really done much of that. And it's been a few years since I've really. And then sometimes I'll draw like these shapes here, and I'll zoom in here to show you what I'm going to do here. With this shape here, I'm not going to go all the way to this edge where that is. I'm just going to kind of hit this here so it has a soft edge, and I'm going to deselect that. And you start to see, even though these shapes aren't absolutely perfect, you see how quickly I'm able to get them working, the way I want them to. Same thing goes for here. I'm going to basically just like kind of, and sometimes if it's like a really small shape, I'll just draw it with my brush. But I might end up just drawing this one with the brush, but there we go. And again, if I'm, I probably will strike it right there so it's not going right up to the edge. Gives it a little bit of what I want it to do. And then here, I'm just simply going to use that brush and draw in a couple of these other shapes here. It's a little, just sometimes it's easier just to do that. Sometimes it's easier to, I like the idea of using, it wasn't necessarily something that I did early on in my career, and a couple of my friends shared with me this is their working process. And their working process was super fast because they were doing entertainment-based illustration, which is not necessarily something I did a lot of early in my career. And I didn't necessarily have to work that way because even though my deadlines were at times kind of crazy, they weren't as intense as they tend to be for that area of the illustration industry or business. So anyway, that's why I kind of, I didn't necessarily think this way. But it's, it came to me easily because I essentially do the same sort of thing when I'm blocking in a traditional painting as I'm looking for the silhouette and the shape design first. Just drawing in some of these shapes here. Let's see. Let me get that a little bit more. Kind of fine tune that a little bit more. So, and again, if anyone has questions or comments or anything, please just let me know in the chat. I didn't necessarily do the best job promoting this. As I said I was going to. It's a lazy Sunday here for me, and I figured, this will be a good test. And I figured those that aren't able to tune in because of time zone difference and all that kind of thing will be able to check out what I'm doing at some other point. I might zoom out just a little bit more here. And again, I'm going to do the same thing over here with, even though, this crane is a little bit more in shadow, but I'm going to work on these shapes here on the body of the truck. And see, I think for up here, I'm just going to again, I'm not worried about getting that perfect on that edge. It's almost like what I would traditionally do with a brush where I try to feather it up and blend at the end here. And then what I'll do now is I'm going to size down my brush. And normally I would wait a bit to do this, but I like that little detail on the hood of this work truck here, or boom crane truck, whatever. And then I'm going to hand draw over here the side panel on that truck and work that in, kind of fix this shape here. So there's that. I'm going to again highlight these little ridges on the top of the roof of the truck right here. Just a very basic sort of thing. A little bit of that there. There's a lot more that I'm going to do to this later on. It's just, right now it's just getting that in and being very disciplined about staying, true to those different layers. But as you can see here, very quickly, I'm able to very quickly block in, and we get that nice sense of light source coming into this composition. That's something I can do with some of the other things in the, there's some subtlety in the darkness here in the car that's in front of me, that's closest to me. There's a couple of highlights here. I'm going to try to work those in on the crane itself, or the boom. And let's get in here to do some of that. At this point, I debate, I think what I might do is just hand draw these in, but just go in super precise, get that blocked in. And then, a couple of these little shapes over here. And obviously there's the guys that are in this, and that's something I'm going to do on a separate layer. And I might not get to that until I start actually, painting. But I'll be getting to it soon. It's just a question of when. And I've always liked these seemingly insignificant moments. When I was in Tokyo a couple of summers ago, I was photographing construction workers there doing different things, and it's always been something I've had a fascination with. And it's just those everyday moments that we don't really pay much attention to because we're thinking about all the things that we're working on and whatnot. But yeah, if you have questions or anything, let me know in the chat. But this is, again, for those just joining in, this is my process in how I started digital painting. I'm doing a little bit of drawing right now, only because it only makes sense because, doing the lasso or the polygonal lasso tool right now is just a little bit overkill for some of these little small areas that I'm busting out at the moment. But yeah. And you can see here there's just a lot with, there's just, there's a lot of interesting shapes that I can get into and start exploring here. And differences in value too, but, not quite there yet. Just want to get the very basics down. I think the other thing that's interesting too is you notice the light on this truck is on. I think what I might do is I'll work in this shape as well. But again, I start my paintings by working, I have my photo reference usually handy, and I'm going to zoom in on this so I can create that. I usually start my paintings when I teach painting, and when I do it myself, I teach, when I'm for example, I teach a beginning painting class. And to illustration students or really any student who's interested. And when I when I teach that class, when I have people learn painting, I usually am teaching them in acrylic, and I teach them with a primary palette, that they mix everything from. It's a warm and cool of each of the primary colors. And that's what I do. That's what I teach. And so when I teach digital painting, I try to make it as similar to traditional painting as possible. The big difference here is that when I teach, when I'm instituting this digital painting component into my traditional painting class, I will usually teach this principle that I'm demonstrating here. I usually show this when after I've done a cut paper exercise, and because the students have already learned how to do grayscale painting, I have them do that at the beginning of the semester in traditional media. But in order to teach it effectively in digital media, because you're using a bunch of different things that you typically don't do when you're a painter, or at least the way I teach it. So, I'm teaching them cut paper, and then I actually have them use the selection tool before I get them into brushes. And, I introduce the concept of layers while they're doing the cut paper exercise digitally. So what I'm showing you here, I'm not going to finish this in this stream. I think I'm going to end in a few minutes here. I might block in a few more shapes before I do that, but essentially the point of what I was hoping to share tonight is to really show you how I start the painting. In a couple of minutes here before I end this live stream, I'm going to share with you the painting that you might be familiar with that I just recently posted to Instagram of the Chicken Shack on Woodward Avenue in Detroit. So, I go through this process of working in grayscale, understanding shape design, blocking everything in layers, and then, teaching other methods, ways to, colorize each of these layers. And then after that point, we get into the nitty-gritty of painting and textures and surfaces using Photoshop. So that's kind of the general outline of how I do this. Now, I'm going to do a couple of more things here. I'm going to get some more of these shapes to this car in front of me figured out. And then I'm going to share with you and give you a breakdown of my most recent painting based off of photo reference. Again, this is, based on my friend Mike Burdick, his idea of like, okay, I need to free up space on my phone, so I'm going to, before I delete these photos, I'm going to pull them off my phone. I'm going to paint or draw them, and then either save them on a drive somewhere or delete them forever. So that's kind of the goal, and I like that goal because it keeps me motivated to work. So I'm going to work on a couple things here for a minute, and then, yeah, and again, if you have anything that, you have questions about or anything of that nature, just let me know. I'm happy to answer what questions you may have. There's the car right there. Okay. Create a new layer, and I'm going to create some of the shapes that the polygonal lasso tool isn't the most precise, tool in Photoshop, but I kind of like how clunky it is. Some people I don't think do. And I also, I'm aware there's other programs or apps out there that are really great for this sort of thing. There's Clip Studio, there's Procreate, there's Adobe Fresco. There's so many great things. But personally, I always go back to Photoshop. It's just, maybe it's because that's what I learned on and I'm most comfortable with it. I figured it would be, the principles that I'm going over here with, lassoing and creating selections and stuff. It's pretty universal across some of these other platforms or apps. And then again, right here where around the license plate thingy, I'm going to strike a shape here. It's not going to necessarily matter if I'm too precise right here because this is, oh, come on. Okay. There we go. The whole idea of this is I'm using this almost like Frisket, where I paint up to this edge and then fade out as I move away from it. See what I mean? So it kind of creates that little, it's almost like an airbrush, stencil or Frisket that I put on there. Kind of the idea. Let's see if I can block out this light real quick before I share this with you. I'm trying to keep this under 40 minutes so that it's easy for everyone to view and all that stuff. I tend to go on and on in these videos, so where are we at here? Okay. That's the other thing too, is I tend to not close these properly, and so then I have to start over again. There we go. Okay. And I sometimes will even I'm not sampling color, but I'm sampling that light tone there just to see if that will do the trick. It does do the trick. I don't need to do too much to it. I think I'll sample it from my painting. I try to sample from the painting wherever I can. Bring that up a bit, block that in real quick. Again, I'm not trying to be sloppy about it, but I'm trying to go in somewhat fast with this because it's the block in phase, and it's kind of, I don't always work this way. I don't always work where I'm doing the grayscale version and then I do the whatever where I do the full color version. This is just really to share with some people that might have difficulty. You haven't worked from photo reference a lot. You're wondering how do I do this? How do you really get good color, and how can you really make things pop compositionally? And color's great. Color's relative. It's really, do you have good value, what we call value grouping, where you are grouping your lights and darks together in interesting patterns. And if you're understanding, even though the highlights seem when you're working from grayscale, even though the highlights might seem really bright on the back of this car in front of me, when you converted that image to grayscale, look how less intense this light is than how it appears in full color. And you actually see the most intent headlamp or lamp on a car is the headlamp on this truck right here that's directly in front of us. So you get a chance by looking at it in grayscale. You don't have the emotional response that you do with color, and you just see what's light, what's dark, what's the patterning, what's the shape design, all those things that really help make a good composition. So that's kind of in short what I'm doing here. I'm going to save this real quick, and then I'm going to share with you the painting that I did. If you didn't see it on Instagram, I have it over there posted, and I'll share that with you momentarily. Let me just open it here. Come on. We have a little bit of lag here. Whoops, it's not wanting to cooperate. Okay, come on. There we go. Okay. Well, actually, here it is, but this is the JPEG. I want to show the layered file. Sorry, one moment here. I opened up the wrong painting. There we go. Okay, so when I open up this painting here, what I wanted to share with you is you see what I get in close here. You see that texture, and that's something I'm super thrilled about. It's basically in Photoshop you have these things called actions that you can record. There's an artist, his name escapes me at the moment, but he successfully figured out how to record those, package them, sells them as Impasto Shop. And when I turn these off here, you'll see how, it's really just, using textured brushes, and not only using textured brushes, but using the mixer brush to blend and smear when I'm not thinking of that. It's almost kind of like, being able to go back into your painting while you're working. I guess I work this way because I work well in oil painting. I'm going to zoom out here, but that's essentially, you see here, I didn't follow the grayscale or value mapping before I started painting because it's something I kind of intuitively do. But here, it's the same kind of idea. It's creating these big shapes and then going in and then drawing. Once I get the shape down, I refine the shape, the silhouette, and then I go in and I do more drawing like I typically do in a painting with traditional media. So that's kind of essentially what I do here. And again, you're seeing this process a little bit more methodical and a little bit more thought out for those that haven't done this before. So hopefully this is helpful. I'm going to be doing more of these where I will be showing you this painting a little bit further along, and I'm going to start to make a lot of this content available via Patreon. That's coming real soon. I just need to wrap up my semester first before I tackle something like that. So be on the lookout for that. It's coming soon, and I will have some more similar tutorial style things available. If there's anything you want to request and it's something that I do, something I'm capable of, I'm more than happy to share it. But a lot of that stuff I'm going to start sharing via Patreon for a nominal fee. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your weekend, and I hope to see you back here soon.